Welcome to another chapter of Journey of Hope. Thrilling stories of people who have encountered some type of medical crisis or traumatic injury and have overcome. They've been impacted by the healing ministry of Loma University Medical Center, and they've gone on to experience hope and healing and happiness and wholeness. Our special guest today is Dr. Howard Gimbel and his wife Judy from Calgary, Canada. And they have a thrilling story to share. Being a surgeon himself, he was confronted with the words, "You have cancer." And Dr. Gimbel and Judy, it's good to have you here, and we want to hear your story. Want to learn a little bit about your background. I, have become acquainted with it during the last 7 or 8 years, and I need to acknowledge here to you and to the audience that when I asked for a bio and a resume, the lady I was talking to said, "Do you want the long version or the short version?" And I said, "Well, why don't you send me the long version?"
Oh my.
And this was the first time I've ever had a bio and a resume that was over 100 pages of all the different abstracts and the different articles and the different events that you've been involved in. But I know you're both from Calgary, Canada. You've had a very exciting work and a ministry there, working with patients from really all around the world with the Gimbel Eye Center. And about 8 years ago, you came here to Loma Linda, and you're the professor and chairman of the Department of Ophthalmology, and also the medical director there at Gimbel Eye Center in Calgary. And I understand you're the CEO of the Gimbel Eye Center. But why don't you tell me and tell the audience here, you come from Calgary, we got some pictures, but you were born there. What part of Canada are we talking about?
I was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
Western Canada. It's above the western part of Montana. And privileged to be born to a farm family. I'd wished I could provide the same to my children, but you can't create it artificially.
Well, I mean, what kind of advantages were there being born on a farm?
Well, interestingly, a gentleman, he was a minister that came to Canada from Egypt, and he was impressed with the farm families in Western Canada that he was meeting, and he said, I have it figured out that the work on a farm is nature created rather than man created. In other words, the chickens are hungry, have to be fed. The cows need to be milked and fed. And it isn't just because Dad's telling you to do it.
It needs to be done.
It needs to be done.
So there are many, many great lessons that you learned as a child. Well,
Yes.
we have some pictures that we'll start with to take a look at, and you kind of describe what we're going to be looking at on the screen here.
Well, that's the farm home, which is a pioneer home. My grandparents, when my dad was about 10 years old, immigrated from North Dakota to Canada and had to break the sod.
The sod. This is another, apparently an aerial view.
This is an aerial view now after, many years. But it was a pioneering community, and the original home was a very simple home, just about almost like storage bins were built and put together, but it was a wonderful experience. My folks made it a very good experience growing up.
And provided a real solid foundation. We're just going to quickly move through some of these pictures. What do we have here?
That's our family, my parents on the left of the picture, and the 6 of us children.
6 children.
One died in infancy of spinal meningitis, the first child, so I'm sure my parents carried that sadness all through their life.
Okay. And here we've got a young man. What's he doing?
Well, that's me in my teenage years, and we had a dairy to help put us kids through Christian education schools. And
so did most of the kids go through Christian education then?
all of the children.
All of them did.
Yes.
What do we have here?
Well, I took my college work at Walla Walla College in the state of Washington, and Dr. Brown there looking on was my major professor. I took a physics major, and I have the privilege of being his friend to this day. He lives here in Loma, and he and his wife, we enjoy getting together with them very much so. He's just a precious mentor and friend and example to me.
Okay, and we've got here, looks like you were part of what?
Well, music was my hobby, and I still have to have music on all the time, but quartet and choir and band was a big part of my college life.
Okay, and
this is our family of 5 children when they were younger.
okay, so this was taking quite a while. So you and Judy got acquainted, I understand, at Walla Walla.
That's right.
And Judy, you're from the Seattle area, and ended up going through Christian education, then went to Walla Walla, and the two of you met, and then you have 5 children of your own. And I think we have one more picture here.
And now 12 grandchildren.
And 12 grandchildren. And what do we have here now?
And that's the whole family together. Let's see, is our youngest on that picture?
No,
That's the
not
one
quite the latest.
That's
Yes,
the
we have
latest one's not right there now. But
one more.
What a wonderful family that you have. So you went to Walla Walla, then you came here to Loma Linda, and went through the School of Medicine, and then went on and you've undoubtedly gone a number of different places. Just briefly tell us, when you graduated from here, what happened?
I took my ophthalmology training in Los Angeles at the White Memorial Medical Center, and then went directly to Calgary, back to Calgary to practice, and didn't practice in that building until 1980, a different location, but now practice in the Executive Professional Center in Calgary.
So we have a picture here of both the Calgary office and the one up in Edmonton.
Yes, and we established a satellite practice in the city of Edmonton because in the early days of cataract surgery and with implants, we had patients coming from all over the province, and they just begged for us to have a center in Edmonton, so we took that practice.
So what's so extremely important, at least from my perspective, is to know that you have been involved in a ministry of impacting other people. And we're going to look in just a couple of minutes here. We got some pictures of surgery, and knowing that people from around the world have come. And, you know, I've read many of the things about you, Dr. Gimbel, and you're world famous. And I know that you've been involved in teaching during some of the surgeries. People around the world have watched the surgery and profited from that. And probably this would be a good time to take a look at one or two of those surgeries. And I understand one of them that we're going to be looking at is unique contributions you've made. What do we have here?
Well, this is the way I operate, looking through a microscope. And I have been privileged to be in a specialty that demands a lot of eye, hand, foot coordination and very delicate work, but it's usually successful and a very happy result. And
what we have
what
here,
we're watching here is the opening of the lens capsule to get at the cataract for removal.
And I understand you developed this technique.
Well, in the early days of this procedure, the capsule was opened with little adjoining tears. It was called a can opener opening, and the Lord blessed me with the idea to make it into a circular opening to resist tearing further out into the equator, and that technique has become world standard.
And you're the one that set the standard on that and developed the technique.
God did it through me.
Through you. Well, I appreciate your recognizing that God is in control of your life and your work and your ministry of healing. And I think we have one more clip here that we're going to take a look at.
This is just an example of just to show that we do refractive surgery as well, which doesn't require as elaborate draping. But for cataract surgery, as we see now, we use a 3mm incision, and this allows patients to be active.
So you're actually going into the eye here. Describe
Yes,
what's happening.
And that's just 3mm width or 2.8mm width. And this particular cataract is very dense. You can see there's no pink reflex like the previous one showed. And so we have put a dye in the eye to stain the capsule and then flushed it out. so that we can see, because without a pink reflex coming from the blood at the back of the eye, it's very difficult to follow this tear going around as we could in the other one with
So
a
now
pink
what are you
reflex.
pulling off from there now?
This is opening the anterior capsule. It's making a manhole in the lens of the eye. Cataract is a cloudiness of the lens of the eye, and this is an extreme case. This is a patient with ankylosing spondylitis that I just did 3 days ago. And you can see his upper lid is in the way because we couldn't even lay him flat for the surgery, so we had to operate a bit at an angle. And this just shows that dense cataract material being broken up and then emulsified and aspirated. This is ultrasonic vibration of the tip of the needle.
So it's pulling it out, isn't it?
That's right. It's sucking it out and replacing it with a balanced saline solution. And God also gave me this fracturing technique to share with the world of divide and conquer, nucleofractus, fracturing the nucleus of the lens. Now that the lens is out, we have a pink reflex, and you can see that manhole opening, and now the new lens that's made of an acrylic plastic so it can be folded up to go through that small incision is placed in the eye, and then it unfolds, and you can see those little arms that go out to center it, because the lens is not as big as the capsule itself, so those arms go out to keep it centered as it scars into place. And then we have to remove the viscous material that we put in the eye to maintain the space as we work in the eye. And this is now being replaced with just the saline solution as the surgery is complete. This is edited down naturally, quite a few minutes down to.
Yeah, so how long did the
minutes.
surgery actually take?
Well, we can do this type of surgery in 10 to 15 minutes, but this particular case would have taken a little longer because of the orientation of the patient and the density of the lens and the extra dye and so forth.
That is amazing. We have one or two more quick pictures we'll take a look at here. And what do we have here?
This is a refractive surgery procedure. We don't have any videos of that procedure, but we can change the shape of the cornea with laser to change the refraction of the eye.
Now, this is an amazing, amazing surgery that you're able to perform. Now, the reason I wanted to go into this background and let our audience know that we're dealing with a world famous surgeon here, and people coming from around the world involved in this ministry that you've been involved in for how many years?
Well, what is it, Judy? 43 years? 43?
Over 40 years. Mm-hmm. And doing a great work for the Lord. And yet, 8 years ago, I remember with my wife, we were on a trip, and we were down in, I think, the Grand Canyon, and you'd been invited to come here to Loma Linda. And you're trying to ascertain whether God wanted you to come. And I remember that night we were standing there, and we formed a little prayer circle and prayed that God would make it very clear. And He did, and you came here. And you've been making a tremendous impact here in Loma Linda with the School of Medicine, and particularly with the department, and people from around the world taking notice about what's happening. And patients from around the world coming. And yet, almost 6 years ago, you were diagnosed with prostate cancer. And you went on a search and ended up deciding that having your treatment right here and using proton was the best way for your treatment at that time for your particular disease. And I remember thinking, wow, Dr. Gimbel and his wife being affected by this, and it's kind of a little bump in the road. When you're praying and asking for God's guidance and direction, and then you're hit with the words, you have cancer, how do you respond to that? And where's God in all of this? What do you say, Judy?
Well, I was particularly shocked because when I was in Loma Linda as a medical student's wife, I was out and sitting on the front row of every nutrition and health class that I could find, and I was going to make sure my wonderful husband that I love so much was going to live twice as long as any regular physician, because I loved him so much.
And you've been extremely conscientious in diet and the way you live and healthful
exercise
living and exercise. In fact, not only have you been doing it and modeling it, you've been sharing with others to do the very same thing.
Took our
and
Master
yet you
of Public
still
Health.
and took your both of you ended up taking your Master of Public Health and many other additional classes and reading, and yet you still were given the words, "You've got cancer." So where's the Lord in all of this? How do you respond?
Where's the devil, I think?
Well, the devil's right there. There's no question. But I mean, people say, well, why do bad things happen to good people?
Well, God never promised us nothing bad would happen to us. He only promised He'd be with us.
Well, that's a very, very important point.
And the wellness part is an insurance policy. It's not a guarantee.
That's right.
Yeah.
So even though you're doing the Lord's work and making an impact and involved in a healing ministry, you yourself are confronted with cancer. So you went through the treatments and it was just kind of a little bump in the road. And then you continued your work and your ministry and going back and forth between here and Canada and working up there with the Gimbel Eye Center and then working down here and working with teaching and the residents and performing surgery.
And that wasn't much of a bump in the road either, though.
It wasn't much of a bump. Now, why do you say that?
Well, I was blessed to be on staff here at the time I was in treatment, because daily treatments, I couldn't work in Canada, but I could go to work here after my treatment first thing in the morning. And
so even though you were being treated yourself for cancer,
I didn't miss a day of work.
You didn't miss any work at all.
Which
Wow.
made me happy.
That's definitely one of the advantages of the Proton Treatment Center. But it didn't end there. I mean, you overcame that, and then just a couple of years ago, you were again diagnosed with a different type of cancer. And what was that?
Well, as I said, we grew up on the farm, and we used to brag or pride ourselves in our suntans.
Well, that was typical of a lot of us in those days.
Yes, no suntan lotion and so forth. And so I think in spite of what Judy may have done to protect me from heart disease and cardiovascular and other, that sunshine I had when I was young started a process that led to a typical skin cancer in the tip of my nose that the local dermatologist had removed a couple of times, and it came back the third time, and he said, well, got to biopsy this. And sure enough, it was a basal cell skin cancer, which is very common, very easily handled, not very threatening because it doesn't metastasize. So I had plastic surgery to remove it and a little flap to cover things up, and we thought it was all going to be finished.
And of course you prayed about it, and the initial results looked like that it was quickly and easily taken care of. However, what happened?
Well, rarely does this cancer get into the nerves and start growing along and within the nerve sheath itself, within the nerve itself. But that's what happened in my case. It's called a perineural spread. And I started getting sensations that I thought was just healing because of buried stitches and so forth. So I gave it 6 months, and and it was still going on, and checked to see if anybody could see anything on the inside of my nose, and it was all clear, and the skin looked perfect, the healing was perfect, and yet these sensations kept making me wonder what was happening. And then when it started getting farther from the site of the original surgery, I started going to neurologists and dermatologists and on both sides of the border, and many tests were done, many MRIs and CTs and bone scans, and nothing could be imaged. But as it extended and even got in not only to the sensory nerve, but the motor nerve in my face, it was obvious that it had to be that, even though imaging could not image it. And a biopsy was done confirming the diagnosis of the perineural spread of this simple basal cell.
And so eventually, what did you decide for a treatment?
Well, at that point, it was obvious that it had gone pretty far because the nerve under my eye was biopsied and it was there already. And it was affecting the motor nerves, so it could have been, you know, who knows how far back. And
This had to be a frightening diagnosis.
It was.
Well-
Judy, how are you responding to this all
Oh,
this time?
it was a real shock, way worse shock than the proton, than the
Than the
prostate.
prostate. Yeah, I mean, where is God in all of this? I mean, how are you responding?
We never ever questioned why it was happening to us because we see a lot of people having to put up
Sure.
with things like this. Sure, we thought we'd have the lower incidence, or the law of average would say we should be on the safe side, but we never blamed God.
And we've been blessed with such excellent health.
But this
Through
had to be a great
genetics and-
test. It had to be a test.
Well,
Yeah, it was
as
scary.
as I look back on it, though, I'm sure, you know, our prayers and the prayers of our friends were answered
Yes.
because we did not have anxiety. We never shed a tear. We never were overcome emotionally with it at all. We
You
just
knew God was in
we
control.
knew God was in control, and
And He was with us. He never ever left us. He never ever, and neither one of us ever came to a point of a disillusionment.
So I know that you're on a regular basis, you're having your daily devotions, you're struggling, you're going through the treatment, and are you able to praise God at this point, or you just know that He's in control, that somehow it's going to work out? You can see the future, but you're not really quite sure yet.
We always knew that He was going to be with us, and He was. He was just so with us. We never lost hope.
You said you had a scripture that you wanted to share.
Yes,
This would be a good time.
Psalms 112, verse 1 and parts of verse 7 and 8. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord. He will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting the Lord. His heart is secure. He will have no fear. And that's just exactly the way it was. He took away the fear, and it was just like He held us.
He gave
In
you a
His arms.
calm then, is
Yes.
what you're saying, that
Yes.
in spite of the uncertainty of everything and not knowing how it was going to turn out. I mean,
Right.
you did go through, I understand, a few, not weeks, but months of treatment.
well, the options were mutilating surgery and then still probably radiation after that, and still no certainty that they've got all the tumor, or radiation, and it was X-ray or proton. And the X-ray people that didn't have proton said go to Loma Linda because it needs to be discreet. This is right next to your eye, and we don't want any radiation affecting your. Radiation would maybe affect your retina and give you cataract and do harm to the nerves. And,
They could take his hearing.
All kinds of possibilities.
but the
Yeah.
proton could be discreet and get just the area that needed to be treated. And we were blessed to be here at Loma Linda to be able to.
How
have
long
that.
how long are we talking about completing the treatment now?
I completed in April of '06.
Okay. Well, now, you've had cancer twice, and we have people from around the world that are watching the program, and many of them this last week have heard that they have cancer. Not going to be the type that you've encountered here undoubtedly, but the terrible words, they have cancer. What kind of words of encouragement would you give to them? I mean, what can you say to people that are involved in something like this? I know, the scripture says that all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord. And it's easier to share that text with somebody else than it is when you're having the experience and you go back and you have to make it your very own. But what would you say? How would you, to some people that are watching?
My attitude, my faith in God was so secure that I said, I know you could heal me in an instant, because there's lots of instances in the Bible you've raised people from the dead. I know that you could do that. And I know you can heal me with medical science and contributing to the process. Or there may be a reason that I'm not going to be healed, and because we have instances of that in the Bible too, and we don't understand why, but there would be a reason that I trust.
Exactly.
So you just trust.
Trust the reason.
Trust you, and we may not even all ever understand on this side, but we have to know that God answers prayer. He answers it in the right way, in the right time, and it's always His timing.
Exactly.
And it's just a matter of trusting in Him. And so really, I suppose one of the lessons is you don't wait till you have the crisis. You have the relationship with the Lord where you're trusting in Him. And then when these calamities, these crises come along, then you know that He's in control of your health and your life. And I'm sure this has made an impact upon family and family members. And I know, knowing the two of you and knowing the following that you have in terms of the ministry you've been performing, people around the world undoubtedly were praying for you.
Yes.
Yes, we have patients and my colleagues around the world, and that's really a very special experience too, to connect on a spiritual level in a crisis. It just bonds friendships in a way that can't be any other way.
Brings you together in a way that is just unbelievable. Well, I want to thank you for being on our program here and for sharing with us here in the studio and for those watching around the world. Dr. Gimbel, I know that God is going to continue to bless both of you and the work that you're doing.
As we trust Him.
And that you're going to continue performing a ministry that's going to bring honor and glory to Him. For those in the audience, we want to thank you for joining us. I'm Lynn Martell with LLBN, Loma Linda Broadcasting Network, and bring you greetings from Loma Linda University and Medical Center. And I want to thank you for joining us. And we are making these programs available. You can write in and with a brief offering, a small offering, request one of these programs or any of the programs we've been conducting. Again, thank you for being with us, and we want to wish you God's richest blessings as you face this new week. Thank you so much for joining us.